Summer is a great time for catching up on military history, and my book about the 7 Black Medal of Honor recipients of World War II, Immortal Valor, has just been released in paperback. Immortal Valor chronicles these timeless heroes' life journeys through all the pain and struggle until their ultimate triumphs. I hope you pick up the new paperback version, hardcover or audiobook, available in stores and online.
When you get to Vietnam, the SEALs, they've been trained from 62 when they're created to 66 when they arrive in Vietnam. They've been trained as coastal commandos to raid installations, to either parachute behind enemy lines, to destroy an enemy headquarters or a truck depot or a radar dish or something like that, and then escape to the sea. When they get to Vietnam, none of this exists.
An excerpt from today's guest, who's written a book about the history of the Navy SEALs. Author and former Navy SEAL Ben Milligan is here, and I'll speak with him right after this break. This is Point of the Spear. Welcome back. I'm Robert Child. Today's guest became a U.S. Navy SEAL in 2001 and served until 2009. He is the recipient of the Bronze Star and other decorations. A native of Indianapolis, he received a BA in History at Purdue and a Master's in International Relations from the University of San Diego. His book is called By Water Beneath the Walls, The Rise of the Navy SEALs. It came out in July, and Ben Milligan joins us now. Ben, welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rob.
It's quite an impressive book, and I just want to reference a review. Deeply researched and well organized and incredibly engaging. By Water Beneath the Walls is one of the finest histories I've read about the formation and the rise of the Navy SEALs. Admiral William H. McRaven. That's impressive. Congratulations.
It was very generous of the Admiral to give that remark.
Yeah. Do you know the Admiral?
I don't. My limited interaction with him was he was running past my class once while he was, I think, the commanding officer of SEAL Team 3. It had been not long after he had published his book, Spec Ops. And so I think just about every reader in my class had at least bought the book. I'm not sure if anyone had actually read it, but we knew who he was. So
you can hold it all up.
Right.
While you're running by.
Yeah, he hoo-yah'd our class and we hoo-yah'd back. So it was quite a moment. So when if I ever do meet him, I'm going to ask him if he remembers me.
Oh, yeah. So you were the one holding up the book.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
right.
Did his writing that book inspire you to write your book? I know it took you 7 years, you said, to write.
It actually took longer, unfortunately. The publisher gave me a 2-year contract to write the thing. I went 6 years over that, and I did an additional 2 years before I even got the contract.
Wow.
So this is a 10-year undertaking. Yes, in some ways. I remember reading the book and I remember liking the episodic quality to it. And the only thing that I had wanted out of his book more was some sort of some sort of connective tissue. When I sat down to write a book, I wanted to grab my reader by the collar and drag him through 500-600 pages.
Right.
But I needed some sort of vehicle to do that, and I loved all of his stories, and I thought a couple of times about pirating a couple of his examples. I ended up going with a completely different set, but he found some good ones. So
yeah, definitely. Had you always wanted to write a book?
Always. I grew up wanting to write history books. I came by it pretty honestly. My mom's dad, my grandfather, was a big reader. He would often he had his own window and awning business, but his hobby was American history. When I was in junior high, he started taking me every fall break to a different American battlefield. So we saw all the American South. We went east. We saw Gettysburg. We saw Revolutionary War battlefields. I I had history in my bones from a very early age, and the only thing that was eluding me for 35 years before I started working on this book was a topic. I just needed that.
Yeah. Well, you certainly wrote about what you know.
Yeah, it's not what I initially set out to do. I had my heart set on writing a book about the First World War. About 2-3 months into my research, I came to the realization no one in their right mind was going to let somebody like me write a book about the First World War. I had no background. I wasn't a PhD. I didn't, so I collected myself and had a little had a little talk with myself, and came to the we all came to the understanding that nobody was going to buy a book by somebody like me unless it was about American special operations. So, and fortunately, I'd always had that question, in my head. I never understood it. This institution that I'd given almost a decade of my life to, and served around the world with. I could never understand why. Me as an American sailor, essentially, a member of the United States Navy, was spending so much time in the deserts of Iraq.
Right.
And it was a puzzle that even when I left the Navy, I couldn't really figure out. I was just stuck with it.
When you returned home on leave one time, didn't your grandmother ask you,
yeah,
in the desert since you were a sailor?
She did. I mean, she wasn't without context herself. She was generation of that gone through World War II, and she'd married a Marine. Her 7 brothers had all been sailors in the United States Navy. She knew what the Navy did. She knew that the Navy didn't send guys into Iraq and Afghanistan. So her understanding of what a SEAL was something vaguely similar to a rescue swimmer, and she didn't understand what the hell I was. She'd been to my graduation, she'd seen the video, but she didn't know. I don't blame her. I didn't either.
Yeah, we're EMS, in the water.
Right.
Man.
Right.
Yeah, it is, for people outside the service, hard to picture what you do. I mean, you see the television and the movies about SEALs, but
right.
For yourself personally, before you went in, became a SEAL, did you have a different concept of what it was, as opposed to after?
I suppose I did. I had some sense of, let me start over. I think I had a really good idea of what the SEAL teams were. And I knew that the SEAL teams operated everywhere on the planet, or at least that's how they build them. And when my first deployment was intimately connected to the Navy, which was a little bit of not what I expected. I had expected a lot more kinetic and on the ground, or either in Iraq or Afghanistan, and we were attached to a MARG or a Marine battalion, and we were, essentially we rode an amphibious landing craft for 6 months, maybe not that long, but we were intimately connected to them. So I was struck by how connected the SEAL teams were to the Navy until I got into my next deployment. And that deployment, the only time we touched the water was in the Euphrates River, and we spent, like I say in the introduction, we spent 6 months doing nothing but setting rooftop ambushes and raiding house after house in search of Al Qaeda, which is exactly what I expected. And I would have been disappointed if I hadn't had that experience. I just didn't understand why I was having it.
Oh, well, it's.
And I didn't understand why, we were out there serving, alongside, American Marines, who I, understood to be the more logical entity for that mission. Yeah. And here we were, time and time again, pushing out further and farther than the Marines. Oftentimes the Marines were coming to get us or help us. We couldn't have been, or would not have been able to do what we did without the Marines. But it still was a contradiction that I couldn't explain.
Did
Took
they
me 10
ever
years.
ask you what you guys were doing there?
Well, like I said, I mean, we were, serving, um, uh, the pleasure of the battle space commander,
Right.
and the battle space commander wanted, his SEALs pushed out as far as he could in search of those insurgents. We got stuck. Then he was going to send his Marines. So
Is there a mission that stands out in your time in the service? Is there anything you could share?
not sure there's a particular mission, but that deployment in particular stands out. I mean that whole deployment is if I have a crowded hour, that's it. I mean it was um, that that deployment reminded me. I would get a sense of that deployment. In the next 10 years that I wrote the book, I was working with local scouts that we had trained, in best as we could in SEAL tactics, which always it was something I always thought about whenever I was, writing sections of the book that dealt with, training indigenous forces, and that happens time and time again in the history of not just naval special warfare, but it happens with the history of American Army special operations. And that seemed to be, for at least me, that seemed to be an entryway for these sorts of commando type operations that the Americans ultimately got into. It seemed to start, at least the Navy's experience in commando type operations. It occurs in World War II in China. Of course, you have this whole period leading up to that moment where you've got Navy scouts and Navy demolitions experts. They're not doing what we would traditionally call special or commando type operations. It's not until the Navy actually gets its own battle space in China, and very few people realize that the Navy had its own battle space in China. It was the Navy essentially had its own army in China. In World War II.
During World War II. Yeah.
In World War II, and there people like Mary Miles and Buck Halpin are literally these are Navy sailors that are leading what are essentially commando raids.
We'll be back to the conversation after this quick break.
It's really a privilege to be involved with a documentary about the USS Franklin. And the Franklin was something that I'd always been fascinated by. And then producer Joe Small and producer-director Rob Childs come to me and say, look, how about if you use your dulcet tones to tell the Franklin story? So as I began to look through the story, and as Rob and Joe kept sending me more and more material, this thing was peeling like an onion. I was seeing more and more and more of a really, really important story in naval history, and one which hadn't been told. So they had to throw a 2-inch heaving line on me to keep me from charging right down here to the studio and helping to put this together.
Captain Dale Dye narrates USS Franklin, Honor Restored. Available now on Amazon Prime. Now back to my conversation with author and former Navy SEAL, Ben Milligan. You mentioned 2 turning points in the history of the SEALs in your book. First was Kennedy, and then second was Vietnam, 1967. Right. Mention what Kennedy did for our listeners.
So Kennedy is the first person, or he's the first well, that's not even true. So there's been a couple of folks at national office and that have been in the presidency who have seen this potential of small units that are able to do more with less. What's Winston Churchill's quote? We've run out of money, now we have to start thinking. So in both instances, the president has been oddly enough a Democrat. You had FDR, who was infatuated with commando raids, and that's how the Marine Corps Raiders are created early on in the war. That's how the Army ultimately decides to create the Army Rangers. And, in each of those instances, the service branches, whether it was the Army or the Marine Corps, they weren't particularly thrilled about having these new units that the president wanted them to have. They made the best of it at the time. But when we get to Kennedy, Kennedy is, you'd think that Kennedy would be this president who he would have the mindset of confronting the Soviets with all the power, all the mechanical power of the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Air Force, bombs, ships. What Kennedy sees, though, is all these small brush fires that are sort of erupting all over the world. And, whether it was his reading of Barbara Tuchman's Guns of August, or his early encounter in the Bay of Pigs invasion, that really scares him of the potential of these small brush fire wars of turning into massive forest fires. So what he wants are these smaller units that are able to confront communism in the third world, and mobilize guerrillas or indigenous peoples, and if not, turn them into capitalists, then at least deny them to the enemy, at least deny them to the communists. Right. So what Kennedy does is he incentivizes the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the American military establishment, to create these small units. That is best seen with his connection to the Green Berets, or to the Army Special Forces. And while he's doing that, though, the Navy, and particularly the Navy's Chief of Naval Operation, Arleigh Burke, he's got this completely other idea. He's not thrilled about the idea of going in and helping indigenous peoples. He has an idea of creating coastal raiders, commandos, something much more in line with traditional Navy missions, which is fine because Kennedy's not around long enough to have much of an impact or input on what the Navy's interpretation of these small units is going to become. Right. To answer your second question, though, and that's, I think, really where it gets interesting. You've got you're getting away from the input of these national level leaders and even the CNO. When you get to Vietnam, the SEALs, they've been trained from 62 when they're created to 66 when they arrive in Vietnam. They've been trained as coastal commandos to raid installations, to either parachute behind enemy lines, to destroy an enemy headquarters or a truck depot or a radar dish or something like that, and then escape to the sea. When they get to Vietnam, none of this exists. There are no radar dishes. There are no enemy headquarters to raid. They don't know what to do. And their first deployment almost ends in abject failure. They almost send them home because of the commanding officer, the platoon commander. He runs off with an American nurse, and he doesn't want his guys to really engage. There's nothing really for them to do. In fact, he tells his replacement, "Don't unpack. This isn't for us." And it's only because of the input of Phil Bucklew that the SEALs ultimately decide to stay in Vietnam. But once they're there, once they've decided to stay, they still don't know what the hell to do. And it takes them another whole year to figure out, well, if we're not going to be coastal raiders, then what are we going to be? Right. And it's up to, junior officers and chief petty officers to figure that out. And ultimately they do. And they transition from being these coastal raiders, which is what the Navy had originally wanted, to go anywhere, capture, kill commandos. I see.
So it really happened in Vietnam.
It happens in Vietnam. That's where the SEALs find their mission, and that mission has, I think, it became the center of gravity for the SEAL teams. It's the cultural center of gravity. Without that mission, the SEAL teams aren't the SEAL teams.
You have a degree in history.
I do.
You mentioned that. Or maybe we didn't.
Oh. It's a long time ago, so I may have forgotten myself.
Yeah. Well, we talked about your love of history and growing up and traveling to all the battlefields, and I've spent a lot of time in Gettysburg, that's for sure.
It's a special place.
This is your first history book. Do you plan additional ones? Do you have that Like you mentioned that World War One book that you just got to do.
Yeah, I that's a great question. Yeah, I don't I do plan, well, I'd like to write another book. This took a lot out of me.
Yeah.
Took a lot out of me for a long time. And I need uh I need some sort of post-traumatic stress uh,
You're a
trip
steel. Come
to get it out
on.
of my head. Not that I wasn't happy to do it. I was thrilled to do it. It was,
Yeah.
it gave me purpose every day. I loved it, but I also, it's an awful heavy burden to have around your neck for 10 years. That said, I don't think I could write anything else. I've not tried to write fiction. I've not tried to write any other type of book. I don't think I have the confidence for fiction. I think you've got to be either an exceptionally confident, smart, or stupid person to to, to throw your hat in the ring in fiction.
Yeah, it's a challenge. But
It's an awfully crowded field, and the one advantage that you have if you're writing history is you've got research to guide you. I always had at least 4 note cards on my desk. I don't really believe in writer's block, but I do believe in not doing enough or sufficient research.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've written historical fiction and nonfiction. I just finished a nonfiction book.
You find the fiction harder, or the
Well, what I was going to say is the fiction is easier.
is it?
You don't have to have the copious research. I mean, I saw your endnotes in the book. There are 20 pages of endnotes, and I have endnotes in my book, and they're 13 pages. But
Right. Yeah, I can. Well, that's true. I just don't. I think I'd get lost in my own head. At least I'm afraid I would. Now, what my agent, you may be familiar with him, Jim Hornfisher, who was an incredible naval historian in his own right. He just passed away from a glioblastoma, much too young. But he, when I started working on this book, I had, this idea that I was going to write this book, and then I'd write my World War One book, and then I'd move on to something completely different. His advice to me was that no writer can ask for a better fate than to be pigeonholed in their own topic. I mean, he was happy just to stay in his lane in naval history and World War II. I'm not sure I would be comfortable just staying in those close confines, but I do think that historical narrative is probably the only thing that I could do.
yeah.
But I do like. I mean, I'm like I'm kind of stuck with this. This is I caught this enthusiasm from my dad and my grandfather and just my family, and I think this is the field that I'll probably stay in, and happy to stay here too.
Yeah, it's a wonderful field.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And underserved too. I mean, I don't know how well colleges are doing these days in teaching in just teaching history. There's a lot of niche topics that people are talking about, but I think that the market is probably the curiosity for what the colleges are leaving out. But
yeah, there is a void out there, especially for a book like this, and especially for people that have a passion for history, because it comes through in the writing. It just.
Oh, thanks.
If you love a topic, you're going to write about it, and you're going to write well about it, and you're going to care about it.
Absolutely.
And connect with the readers, and that's what's important, in my view.
I don't know. I couldn't agree more. It's probably. I mean, the best reason I come across for not going into academia is I never wanted anybody to tell me what to write about. I wanted to come to my topics, and. I didn't want to publish something because there was a need for it. I wanted to write something because I wanted to write it, or because I wanted to learn about it. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I don't care if anybody else reads it. I wrote this book for me. I didn't write this for a target audience, or I wrote the book that I wanted to read. And I think, this, like I said, it's an underserved. I don't think a lot of folks have put a lot of deep thought into American special operations. I think because a lot of writers of history have rightly thought that this is, a corner of American military history that hasn't been particularly consequential, at least until the last 20 years. And now it's overwhelmingly consequential. We wouldn't have these, monumental moments like with the killing of al-Baghdadi, or the killing of Osama bin Laden, or, the Green Berets, getting in leading a horseback campaign in the middle of Afghanistan. I mean, these are, we wouldn't have the reach that our military has today without these units. And, this book is, if nothing else, I mean, half of the book is, history of, how the SEALs got out of the water, how the Navy's special operations units got out of the water. But the whole other half is the reason they got out of the water. Right. And they wouldn't have gotten out of the water if it wasn't for these, other units in American military history, the Rangers and the Raiders, and all of these units that were created by the Army, created by the Marine Corps, and for whatever reason, they were disbanded. They were disbanded right when they were getting good, leaving this monumental gap for the Navy to fill.
And they have filled it, that's for sure.
Yeah, they filled it. But the best part of the whole story is that, all these other units have come back, and now they're, mutually supportive. There's still some brotherly rivalry, but to see these units work together, it's and then to see them working together, but then to understand their histories and their mutually supporting histories, and how these units, whether they're Green Berets or Rangers or Delta Force or SEALs or whatever, these units would not exist without each other, without the overlapping legacies of guys like Charlie Beckwith and Mary Miles and Bill Donovan and Phil Bucklew. And these people, they contributed to each other's history, whether we know it or not.
Fascinating history, absolutely fascinating history, and a fantastic book.
Thank you very much.
The book is called By Water Beneath the Walls, The Rise of the Navy SEALs. It's out now. Ben, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Rob.
That's it for this episode. Thanks again for joining me. Next time, my guest will be Colin Cahoon, author of Mended Wings, the Vietnam War experience through the eyes of 10 American Purple Heart helicopter pilots.
I've known a lot of Vietnam vets through my career and my personal life, and there's probably some out there. There has to be, that were not shot down. But I have to tell you, I don't recall ever meeting one. All these guys, even if they weren't injured, and there are a lot of them who are Purple Heart recipients, but all of them were shot down at least once, twice, sometimes 6 to 10 times. They were definitely the pointed end of the spear of the American military effort, and they took a disproportionate amount of beating as a result.
That's next time. And you can stay up to date with all the upcoming guests. Just sign up for the email newsletter at robchild.net. I'm Robert Child, and this has been Point of the Spear.
Music licensed from audioblocks.com. Point of the Spear is produced by RSC Media Group.